Dr. Elena Vasquez rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the screens around her. She had been working for 12 hours straight at the Deep Space Monitoring Station Hermes. The station floated in the cold darkness near Neptune, far from Earth. It was the year 2387, and humanity had built this place to listen for signals from space. Elena was a xenolinguist. She studied alien languages, even though humans had never found any aliens. Her job was to listen to the radio waves that came from deep space. Most of the time, she heard nothing but static and the natural sounds of stars and planets. But today felt different. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago. Her colleague, Dr. James Park, was sleeping in the next room. Elena preferred to work the night shift because space was quieter then. Fewer human ships were broadcasting, and she could focus better on the signals from far away. At 3:47 in the morning, something changed. Elena noticed a pattern in the static that made her sit up straight. Her computer screens showed a signal coming from the direction of Kepler 442, a star system 1,200 light-years away. The signal was weak, but it was definitely artificial. Elena turned up the volume and listened carefully. What she heard made her heart race. It was a voice, a young voice, speaking in a language she had never heard before. But more than that, she could hear something in the voice that needed no translation. Fear, pain, desperation. The voice belonged to a child. Elena quickly started recording everything. Her hands shook as she typed commands into her computer. The signal was getting clearer now, and she could hear more than just the voice. There were background sounds, explosions, screaming, and the terrible noise of something being destroyed. The child's voice repeated the same message over and over. Elena could not understand the words, but she understood the emotion. This was a cry for help. Someone, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, was asking for rescue. The transmission lasted exactly 73 seconds. Then it stopped, replaced by empty static. Elena tried to get it back, but the signal was gone. She played the recording, again and again, each time feeling more certain that she had just heard something that would change everything. Elena woke up Dr. Park immediately. He was not happy about being disturbed, but when he heard the recording, his anger turned to amazement. Both scientists spent the next hour analyzing the signal. Their computers confirmed what Elena already knew. This was real. This was the first confirmed message from an intelligent alien species. But it was not a message of greeting or friendship. It was a scream for help. Elena called Commander Sarah Chen, the director of the monitoring station. Chen was a former military officer who had taken the job because she believed in the importance of listening to space. She arrived at Elena's workstation within minutes, still wearing her pajamas. When Chen heard the recording, her face went pale. She was a tough woman who had seen combat in the Mars Rebellion, but the sound of the alien child's voice affected her deeply. She listened to it 3 times before speaking. "We need to contact Earth Command immediately," Chen said. "This is the most important discovery in human history." While Chen made the emergency call to Earth, Elena and Park continued studying the signal. They used every tool they had to squeeze more information from those 73 seconds of alien transmission. What they found made the situation even more urgent. The background sounds were not random. They were the sounds of war. The computers identified energy weapon discharges, the rumble of explosions, and the distinctive interference pattern that happened when communication networks were being destroyed. Someone was attacking the world where this child lived. Elena enhanced the audio and found something that made her cry. Behind the main voice, she could hear other children. They were crying, calling out in the same alien language. The child who sent the message was not alone. There were others, and they were all in terrible danger. The response from Earth Command came quickly. Within an hour, Elena's small monitoring station was connected to the most powerful computers and brightest minds on Earth. Linguists, military, Experts, scientists, and government officials all studied the alien message. Elena found herself talking to people she had only seen on news broadcasts. The president of the United Earth Council wanted to hear her opinion. Military generals asked her technical questions. Famous scientists requested copies of her data. But through it all, Elena kept thinking about the voice. It belonged to someone. Young, someone scared, someone who had used their world's emergency broadcast system to send a desperate message into space. That child had hoped that someone, somewhere, might hear and come to help. The debate on Earth was intense. Some people argued that humanity should stay hidden. If aliens were being attacked, the same thing might happen to Earth. It was safer to pretend they had never heard the message. Others disagreed strongly. They said that humanity had a duty to help. If there were children in danger, Earth could not ignore their cries for help. The argument went on for hours as the world's leaders tried to decide what to do. Elena did not participate in the debates. She was too busy working. She had discovered that the alien signal contained more than just the voice message. Hidden in the static were fragments of other transmissions. These were automatic distress signals from the alien world's defense systems. They told a story of systematic destruction. The attacking force was not interested in conquest. They were destroying everything. Cities, forests, oceans. All of it was being turned into empty wasteland. This was not war. This was genocide. Elena shared her findings with Earth Command. The new information reached the debating politicians just as they were preparing to vote on humanity's response. When they heard that an entire species was being wiped out, the argument stopped. President Maria Santos called for an immediate vote. The question was simple. Should humanity respond to the alien distress call? Elena watched the vote on her computer screen. Representatives from every nation on Earth cast their ballots. Some voted quickly, others took time to think. But when? The counting was finished. The result was clear. The vote was unanimous. Every single representative voted yes, humanity would respond. Within minutes of the vote, Admiral Jiang Wei of the Solar Defense Force was given emergency powers to organize a rescue mission. Earth's military began mobilizing on a scale never seen before. Ships throughout the solar system received new orders. Weapons factories switched to emergency production. Hospitals prepared medical supplies for alien refugees. Elena sat in her chair at the monitoring station, watching the lights of human ships moving through space. In just a few hours, the lonely outpost where she worked had become the center of the largest military operation in human history. She played the alien child's message one more time. The voice still sounded scared and desperate, but Elena heard something else now. Hope. The child had sent their message believing that someone good might hear it, someone who would care enough to help. Elena smiled as she watched the human fleet gathering. The child had been right to hope. Someone had heard. Someone did care. And now, all the power and determination of humanity was focused on a single goal. They were going to answer that cry for help. Commander Chen walked over to Elena's workstation. The older woman looked tired but determined. She had just finished, coordinating with Earth Command, and was preparing to send some of her best staff to join the rescue mission. "Elena," Chen said, "they want you on the mission. Your expertise with the alien language will be crucial." Elena nodded. She had expected this request. She was probably the human who knew the most about the alien voice, even though she had only heard it for 73 seconds. "When do we leave?" Elena asked. "As soon as the fleet is ready," Chen replied. "Admiral Chen estimates 18 months. Travel time to reach the Kepler 442 system." Elena looked at her computer screens, then at the recording of the alien message. 18 months was a long time. She hoped they would not be too late, but humanity was coming. The sky itself was about to answer that single cry that had reached Earth. The news of the alien distress call spread across Earth like wildfire. Within 6 hours of Elena's discovery, every major government, corporation, and research facility on the planet knew about the message. The world had never moved so fast or with such unity of purpose. In Geneva, the Earth Command headquarters became a hive of activity. Scientists, military officers, and politicians worked around the clock. The building's lights never went out as humanity's best minds focused on understanding what they had heard from space. Dr. Rajesh Patel led the analysis team at the Bangalore Institute of Technology in India. His specialty was extracting information from damaged signals. When he first heard Elena's recording, he knew there was more hidden in those 73 seconds than just the child's voice. Patel's team used the most advanced computers on Earth to analyze every tiny detail of the alien transmission. They separated the voice from the background noise, then studied each sound individually. What they found painted a horrifying picture. The explosions in the background were not random. They followed a pattern that suggested orbital bombardment. Someone was firing massive weapons from space, targeting specific locations on the alien world. The pattern was systematic and thorough, designed to destroy everything that could support life. The energy signatures in the signal told another story. The aliens had tried to fight back. Their defensive systems had activated and fired at the attackers. But the battle was clearly one-sided. The alien weapons were no match for whatever was destroying their world. Most disturbing of all were the communication fragments. Patel's computers found pieces of other messages hidden in the static. These were automatic distress signals from the alien world's defense network. The signals showed that the attack had been going on for days before the child's message reached Earth. The attackers were not just destroying cities and military targets. They were systematically eliminating communication networks, power plants, and transportation systems. This was not conquest. This was the complete destruction of a civilization. Patel shared his findings with Earth Command immediately. The report reached President Maria Santos just as she was preparing for an emergency session of the United Earth Council. The presidents, prime ministers, and leaders of every nation on Earth gathered in the Great Assembly Hall in New York. The debate was fierce. Some leaders argued that humanity should remain hidden. If aliens were capable of destroying entire worlds, Earth might be next. They said it was too dangerous to reveal humanity's location to such powerful enemies. General Patricia Morrison of the North American Defense Force supported this view. She stood before the assembly and showed them computer simulations of what orbital bombardment could do to Earth's cities. Billions of people could die in hours if humanity attracted the wrong attention, but other leaders disagreed strongly. Chancellor Klaus Weber of the European Federation argued that humanity had a moral duty to help. He reminded the assembly that the message had come from a child. How could they ignore a child's cry for help? President Chen Lu of the Asian Coalition agreed. She told the assembly about her own daughter, who was the same age as the alien child sounded. She asked how they could look their own children in the eyes if they abandoned alien children to die. The debate continued for hours. Leaders spoke passionately on both sides. Some worried about humanity's safety, others worried about humanity's soul. The world watched as its leaders struggled with the most important decision in human history. Then Dr. Patel's team made another discovery. They had been working continuously to extract more information from the alien signal. Using new enhancement techniques, they managed to clean up more of the background audio. What they found changed everything. Behind the main child's voice, they could now hear other voices clearly. These were also children, calling out in the same alien language. The computers counted at least 12 different young voices in the background. They were crying, calling for their parents, asking for help in words that needed no translation. President Santos received this information during a brief recess in the debate. When the assembly reconvened, she shared the discovery with the world's leaders. The great hall fell silent as they listened to the enhanced recording. The sound of alien children. Crying for help was more powerful than any argument. Leaders who had been worried about humanity's safety found themselves thinking about the safety of those distant children. The debate was over. Admiral Jiang Wei of the Solar Defense Force stood to address the assembly. He was an old soldier who had fought in 3 wars, but his voice shook with emotion as he spoke. "I have spent my life preparing to defend humanity from threats," he said. "But I never imagined that our first contact with aliens would be the sound of their children crying for help. We cannot call ourselves civilized if we ignore this call." The vote was scheduled for that evening, but many leaders had already made up their minds. President Santos called for the vote early, sensing the mood of the assembly. The question was simple. Should humanity organize a military response to the alien distress call? One by one, the world's leaders cast their votes. The electronic voting system displayed the results in real time. Green lights appeared on the massive screen as nation after nation voted yes. Not a single red light appeared. The final count was unanimous. Every nation on Earth voted to respond to the cry for help from space. The assembly hall erupted in applause, but it was not a celebration. It was the sound of humanity accepting its responsibility to protect the innocent, even when those innocents lived among distant stars. Admiral Jiang immediately activated the Solar Defense Force's emergency protocols. Within minutes, every military installation in the solar system received new orders. The largest military mobilization in human history had begun. On Mars, the great shipyards that usually built cargo vessels and passenger liners switched to military production. Workers who had never seen combat began installing weapons and armor on civilian ships. The Red Planet's orbital factories worked without rest, turning out ammunition and supplies for the coming mission. Europa Station, humanity's greatest military shipyard, became the center of fleet preparation. The pride of humanity's navy, the dreadnought Indomitable, was pulled from its patrol route and rushed to Europa for upgrades. Engineers worked in 3 shifts to install the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself at the center of the preparation efforts. As the person who had first heard the alien message, she was considered humanity's leading expert on the alien species. Military planners wanted her opinion on everything from communication protocols to rescue procedures. Elena worked with Admiral Sarah Chen, who had been promoted from monitoring station commander to expedition leader. Chen was a logical choice for the mission. She understood the importance of the alien signal and had the military experience to lead a complex operation. The 2 women spent weeks planning for every possible scenario. They prepared diplomatic messages in case they encountered friendly aliens. They designed rescue protocols for alien survivors. They even planned for the possibility that they might arrive too late to save anyone. But mostly, they prepared for war. Intelligence analysts studied the fragments of battle sounds from the alien transmission. They built computer models of the attacking force based on the energy signatures and weapon patterns. The enemy appeared to use advanced technology, but human weapons had advantages too. Human military doctrine had been developed through centuries of warfare. Humans had fought each other in space, on planets, and in the depths of ocean worlds. Their weapons were designed for survival, not conquest. Their tactics were brutal and efficient. The enemy that was destroying the alien world had grown comfortable with easy victories. Their attack patterns showed they were used to fighting opponents who could not fight back effectively. They would not be prepared for humanity's response. As the weeks passed, the human fleet grew larger. Ships arrived from every corner of the solar system. Military vessels, cargo ships converted to troop transports, hospital ships prepared for alien refugees, and supply vessels loaded with everything needed for a long campaign. Elena watched the fleet assembly from Europa Station's observation deck. Hundreds of ships floated in space, their lights creating a new constellation. Each ship represented humanity's commitment to answer the call for help that had crossed 1,200 light-years of empty space. The final ship to join the fleet was the Indomitable. The massive dreadnought was the most powerful weapon humanity had ever built. Its armor could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. Its main guns could destroy a city with a single shot. It was beautiful and terrible, a symbol of humanity's power to protect the innocent. Admiral Chen gave the order to depart on a cold morning in March. Elena stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching Earth grow smaller through the viewports. She thought about the alien child whose message had started this incredible journey. The child was probably dead by now. The attack on their world had been going on for weeks. But Elena hoped that some survivors remained hidden, waiting for rescue. That might never come. They were wrong about that. Rescue was coming. 847 human ships entered hyperspace. The human fleet traveled through hyperspace for 18 long months. During that time, the 847 ships became a floating city among the stars. Soldiers trained for combat they had never experienced. Scientists studied everything they knew about the alien signal. Engineers prepared weapons and equipment for unknown challenges. Dr. Elena Vasquez spent most of her time in the Indomitable's language laboratory. She had listened to the alien child's message thousands of times, analyzing every sound and syllable. Slowly, she began to understand pieces of the alien language. It was beautiful and complex, nothing like any human tongue. The aliens called themselves the Etherians. Their world was named Ethros, which meant harmony of light in their language. Elena learned that the child who had sent the message was named Kailash. The name meant small star or hope. It was a fitting name for someone whose cry for help had traveled across the galaxy. As Elena studied the language, she also learned about Etherian culture from the fragments hidden in their transmissions. They were a peaceful people who had lived in balance with their world for thousands of years. They had no armies, no weapons of war. Their greatest achievements were in art, music, and the study of crystals that grew naturally on their planet. This made the attack on their world even more tragic. The Etherians had done nothing to provoke violence. They had simply been unlucky, enough to live on a world that someone else wanted. Admiral Sarah Chen used the long journey to prepare her forces for any situation they might encounter. The human fleet practiced formations, tested weapons, and ran simulation after simulation of the coming battle. Chen was a careful planner who believed in being ready for anything. The intelligence reports that reached the fleet during the journey painted a grim picture. Long-range sensors detected the attackers still in the Kepler 442 system. They had established orbital stations around Ethros and were systematically stripping the planet of its resources. The beautiful world that Elena had glimpsed in the alien transmissions was being turned into a barren wasteland. The attackers called themselves the hegemony of the Crimson Star. They were a militaristic species that had conquered dozens of worlds across their region of the galaxy. Their method was always the same: arrive with overwhelming force, eliminate all resistance, strip the world of anything valuable, then move on to the next target. Intelligence analysts studied captured transmissions from the hegemony forces. Their leader was a being called Warlord Thekmor, a veteran of 30 successful conquests. He commanded a fleet of 200 ships and had never lost a battle. His forces were experienced, well-equipped, and confident in their superiority. But the hegemony had made their conquests against peaceful species like the Etherians. They had never faced an opponent that fought back with real skill and determination. They had certainly never faced humanity. 3 months before reaching the Kepler 442 system, the human fleet received disturbing news. Long-range sensors detected a massive explosion on the surface of Ethros. Analysis suggested that the hegemony had destroyed one of the planet's major cities. Billions of innocent beings had died in an instant. The news hit the human fleet hard. Soldiers who had been preparing for 18 months suddenly understood that they were racing against time. Every day they traveled through hyperspace, More Etherians died. Every hour of delay meant more children would never see their parents again. Elena felt the weight of responsibility heavily. She was the one who had heard Kyle Ash's message. She was the reason this entire fleet was crossing the galaxy. Sometimes she wondered if she had made the right choice. Was it worth risking human lives to save aliens they had never met? Then she would remember the sound of that child's voice, scared and desperate, but still hoping that someone good might hear. She would remember the other children crying in the background, and she would know that humanity was doing the right thing. Admiral Chen called a final strategy meeting as the fleet approached its destination. The ship's main conference room was filled with officers, scientists, and specialists from across the human fleet. The mood was serious but determined. "We'll drop out of hyperspace in 12 hours, Chen announced. Long-range scans show the hegemony fleet is still in orbit around Ethros. They've built several orbital platforms and are continuing to strip mine the planet's surface. The tactical display showed the enemy positions. The hegemony had clearly grown comfortable in their conquest. Their ships were spread out in a loose formation, not expecting any threat. Their orbital platforms were heavily armed but positioned for surface bombardment, not fleet combat. Intelligence estimates suggest the hegemony has superior individual ship technology, Chen continued. Their shields are stronger, their weapons have longer range, but they're not expecting us, and they've never faced human tactics. Colonel James Martinez, the fleet's Marine commander, stood up. What about survivors? On the surface, our mission is rescue as much as combat. Elena activated her own presentation. Based on the transmissions we've intercepted, there are definitely survivors. The Etherians have extensive underground cave systems that they use for crystal mining. Many civilians fled underground when the attack began. Our job is to find them and get them to safety. Dr. Lisa Chang, the fleet's xenobiologist, added her concerns. We need to be prepared for biological incompatibilities. The Etherians breathe a slightly different atmosphere than humans. We'll need environmental suits for any direct contact. The meeting continued for hours as the officers planned every detail of the coming operation. Combat formations, rescue protocols, medical procedures, even diplomatic procedures in case the hegemony wanted to surrender. Chen was thorough and wanted her people ready for anything. Finally, Admiral Chen stood for her closing remarks. The room fell silent as she looked at each officer in turn. In 12 hours, we'll drop out of hyperspace and face an enemy that has conquered dozens of worlds, she said. They think they're the strongest force in this region of space. They think no one can challenge them. Chen paused, letting her words sink in. They're about to learn what happens when someone hurts children and humanity hears about it. We didn't cross 200 light years of space to negotiate. We didn't bring 800 ships to make threats. We came here to do what's right, no matter the cost. The officers nodded grimly. They understood their mission and were ready to carry it out. Elena returned to her quarters after the meeting. She had 12 hours before the battle began. 12 hours before she would learn if their journey had been worthwhile. She tried to sleep but found herself listening to Kyle Ash's message one more time. The child's voice still sounded scared, but Elena heard something else now. Trust. Kyle Ash had believed that someone good would hear their call for help. Someone who would care enough to travel across the galaxy to answer. Elena smiled. The child had been right to trust. Humanity had heard, and humanity was about to answer. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Soldiers checked their weapons and armor. Engineers made final adjustments to ship systems. Medical personnel prepared treatment areas for alien refugees. Everyone knew that in a few hours, they would either be heroes or martyrs, but no one suggested turning back. The sound of those alien children crying for help had touched something deep in the human soul. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to abandon their mission now. Admiral Chen stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching. The countdown timer ticked toward 0. Behind her, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Around her, 846 other ships held position, waiting for her command. Chen thought about her own daughter back on Earth. If aliens had attacked humanity, if her child had been crying for help in some underground shelter, she would want someone to come. She would want someone to care enough to cross the impossible distances between stars. The timer reached 0. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace. The Kepler 442 system appeared on the main screen. In the distance, the planet Ethros hung like a wounded jewel, its surface scarred by orbital bombardment. Around it, the ships of the hegemony fleet moved. In lazy orbits, confident in their dominance, they were about to learn that their confidence was misplaced. Humanity had arrived, and humanity was angry. Chen opened a channel to all ships in the human fleet. Her voice carried across 847 vessels, reaching every human who had made the long journey from Earth. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. We have traveled further than any human fleet in history. We have come to answer a cry for help that crossed the galaxy. Today, we show the universe what humanity stands for. She paused, looking at the tactical display that showed the enemy fleet. Today, we rescue the innocent. Today, we punish the guilty. Today, we make it clear that no one hurts children while humanity draws breath. Chen's hand moved to the command. Console, all ships, battle stations, let's bring those children home. The moment the human fleet appeared in the Kepler 442 system, alarms began screaming aboard every hegemony ship. Warlord Thekmor was dragged from his sleep by his panicked officers. The massive alien commander stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 powerful arms. He had never been surprised by an enemy in 30 years of conquest. "What is the meaning of this disturbance?" Thekmor growled, his translator converting his words into standard galactic language. His red eyes glowed with anger as he stomped onto the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Destroyer. "Unknown fleet, Warlord," his tactical officer reported. 847 vessels. Configuration unknown. They appeared from hyperspace without warning. Thekmor studied the tactical display with growing amusement. The unknown ships were smaller than hegemony vessels with primitive-looking designs. Their formation was tight and disciplined, but their technology appeared inferior. "Have they attempted communication?" Thekmor asked. "No, Warlord. They're maintaining position at the edge of the system." Thekmor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. In 30 conquests, he had seen this before. Some species tried to rescue their allies, arriving too late with too few ships. It never ended well for the rescuers. "Open a communication channel," Thekmor ordered. "Let me speak to whoever leads this pathetic rescue attempt." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Chen received the incoming transmission. She looked at Elena, who nodded that the translation systems were ready. The alien language was harsh and guttural, nothing like the musical tones of the Etherians. Thekmor's image appeared on the main screen. The sight of the massive alien warlord caused several bridge officers to step back. His 4 arms were crossed, and his red eyes burned with contempt. "I am Warlord Thekmor of the hegemony of the Crimson Star," the alien announced. "This system is under hegemony control. You will withdraw immediately or face destruction." Chen stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. She was much smaller than the alien warlord, but her voice carried absolute authority. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Force. We received a distress call from this system. We're here to provide assistance to any survivors." Thekmor's laughter filled the bridge speakers. "Humans? I have never heard of your species. You are clearly primitives who have stumbled into affairs beyond your understanding. The indigenous population of this world resisted hegemony expansion. They have been pacified according to standard protocols." Elena felt sick hearing the word pacified. She had spent 18 months learning about Etherian culture, about their love of art and music and crystal gardens, the idea of their peaceful, Civilization being pacified by this monster made her angry. Chen's expression didn't change, but her voice grew colder. "We've analyzed your standard protocols, Warlord. You've committed genocide against a peaceful species. You've murdered billions of innocent beings, including children. The weak exist to serve the strong," Thekmor replied. "This is the natural order of the galaxy. Your small fleet cannot change this reality. Withdraw now, and I will allow you to leave with your lives." Chen looked around her bridge at the faces of her officers. She saw determination, anger, and absolute resolve. These people had traveled across the galaxy to answer a child's cry for help. They would not be intimidated by a bully no matter how large his fleet. "Warlord Thekmor," Chen said quietly, "you have made the gravest error in the history of this galaxy. You have harmed children, and humanity has heard their cries. We do not forgive, we do not forget, and we do not show mercy to those who prey upon the innocent." The alien warlord's amusement faded. "You dare threaten the hegemony? I have conquered 30 worlds with this fleet. Your primitive ships are no match for our technology." Chen smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "You've conquered 30 worlds full of peaceful beings who couldn't fight back. Today, you face something different. Today, you face humanity." She turned to her tactical officer. "End transmission. All ships, attack formation Alpha. Target their command ship first." The communication channel closed, leaving Thekmor staring at empty space. For the first time in decades, the warlord felt a flicker of uncertainty. There had been something in the human admiral's voice, a certainty that suggested she knew something he didn't. "All ships, battle formation," Thekmor ordered. "These primitives want to die with their pathetic allies. We will accommodate them." The hegemony fleet moved into attack formation. 200 heavily armed ships spread across space, their weapons charging and shields activating. They had superior technology, greater numbers in individual ship size, and decades of combat experience. Victory should have been certain, but the hegemony had never faced human military doctrine. They had never encountered weapons designed by a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of war against enemies of equal technological capability. Admiral Chen watched the enemy formation on her tactical display. The hegemony ships were impressive, but their positioning revealed their weakness. They expected to fight opponents who would try to match them ship to ship. They weren't prepared for human tactics. "All ships, execute attack pattern Delta," Chen ordered. "Drone swarms. Launch immediately. All vessels. Maximum acceleration." The human fleet exploded into motion. The ships were smaller than their hegemony counterparts, but they were faster and more maneuverable. They had been designed for hit-and-run tactics, not the slugging matches that the hegemony preferred. Thousands of combat drones launched from the human ships, forming swarms that moved like deadly clouds through space. Each drone was small and expendable, but together they created a storm of projectiles that confused enemy targeting systems. Thekmor watched in growing alarm as the human formation split into multiple attack groups. Instead of charging directly at his fleet, they were spreading out, using the orbital debris around Ethros as cover. Their smaller ships could hide behind asteroids and space junk that his larger vessels couldn't use. "Target the leading ships," Thekmor ordered. "Show these primitives the power of hegemony weapons." The hegemony fleet opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. But the human ships weren't where the beams were aimed. They had already moved, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the attacks. Meanwhile, the human drone swarms reached the hegemony formation. Thousands of small projectiles slammed into enemy shields, causing much individual damage, but overwhelming the defensive systems through sheer numbers. The hegemony had never faced this type of attack before. The first human ships reached weapons range and opened fire. Their weapons were different from anything the hegemony had encountered. Instead of energy beams, They fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds. The kinetic weapons punched through shields that were designed to deflect energy, causing massive damage to hegemony hulls. Thekmor's flagship shuddered as human projectiles struck its armor. The warlord grabbed a console to steady himself, his red eyes wide with shock. His shields had barely slowed the enemy weapons. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Their technology is primitive." His tactical officer worked frantically at his console. "Their weapons use kinetic energy instead of plasma. Our shields aren't calibrated for this type of attack." A human destroyer squadron swept past the hegemony formation, firing continuously. Their weapons were smaller than the massive energy cannons on hegemony ships, but they fired much faster. Each ship could put dozens of projectiles into space every second. The hegemony tried to respond, but their heavy weapons couldn't track the fast-moving human ships. Their energy beams were designed for long-range combat against slow-moving targets. The humans fought up close, darting in and out of range before the hegemony could respond effectively. Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. The plan was working perfectly. Human ships were taking damage, but they were giving far more than they received. The hegemony's superior individual ship power meant nothing when they couldn't hit their targets. "Focus fire on their orbital platforms," Chen ordered. "We need to stop the bombardment of the surface." Human attack groups peeled off from the main battle to assault the hegemony's orbital installations. These massive platforms had been built to bombard planets, not to fight mobile opponents. Their weapons were pointed downward, leaving them vulnerable to attack from space. Elena watched from the Indomitable's bridge as human ships swarmed around the orbital platforms. The installations were huge and heavily armored, but they couldn't maneuver. The human ships picked them apart piece by piece, their kinetic weapons punching holes in armor that had been designed to withstand planetary defense systems. One by one, the orbital platforms exploded. Each destruction ended the bombardment of another section of Ethros's surface. Elena hoped that somewhere below, Etherian survivors were watching the sky and realizing that help had finally arrived. The space battle continued for 3 hours. The hegemony fought desperately, but they were completely outmatched by human tactics. Their larger ships were powerful but slow. Their energy weapons were impressive but ineffective against fast-moving targets with specialized armor. The surface of Ethros was a heartbreaking sight. What had once been a beautiful world of crystal gardens and flowing cities was now a wasteland of craters and twisted metal. The hegemony's orbital bombardment had turned forests into ash and oceans into steam. But Elena knew that somewhere beneath the devastation, survivors were hiding. Admiral Chen deployed search and rescue teams across the planet's surface. Human soldiers in environmental suits spread out from their landing craft, using sensors to search for signs of life. The Etherians had fled underground when the attack began, and the humans needed to find them quickly. Elena worked with Dr. Lisa Chang to modify human communication equipment for Etherian frequencies. If there were survivors, they would need to establish contact before attempting rescue. The language barrier was significant, but Elena had spent 18 months learning to understand Etherian speech patterns. Colonel Martinez led the Marine teams on the surface. The experienced soldier had fought in difficult conditions before, but the devastation on Ethros was unlike anything he had seen. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble. The crystal formations that had been the heart of Etherian civilization were shattered and blackened. "Command, this is Marine Team Alpha," Martinez reported over the radio. "We're at the coordinates where the distress signal originated. The surface installations are completely destroyed, but we're detecting artificial structures underground." Elena listened to the radio traffic from the Indomitable's communication center. Each report brought new evidence of the hegemony's brutal efficiency. They had not simply conquered Ethros. They had tried to erase every trace of its civilization. But the Etherians had been clever. Their ancestors had carved extensive cave systems for crystal mining and geological research. These underground networks had become shelters when the bombardment began. Elena's analysis suggested that thousands of survivors might be hiding in the deepest caves. "Dr. Vasquez," Colonel Martinez called over the radio, "we need you down here. We've found an entrance to the underground systems, but there's some kind of barrier blocking access." Elena grabbed her environmental suit and headed for the shuttle bay. This was the moment she had been preparing for during the entire journey. She was about to make first contact with the alien species whose cry for help had brought humanity across the galaxy. The shuttle ride to the surface was bumpy, but quick. Elena looked out the window at the scarred landscape below. It was hard to imagine that this wasteland had once been a garden world filled with art and music. The hegemony's cruelty was almost beyond human comprehension. Elena's shuttle landed near a partially collapsed crystal formation. Colonel Martinez met her at the landing site, his face grim behind his helmet visor. "The entrance is over here," Martinez said, leading Elena toward a crack in the rock face. "Our sensors show extensive tunnel systems beyond the barrier, and we're definitely picking up life signs. But we can't get through." Elena examined the barrier blocking the cave entrance. It wasn't made of rock or metal. It was some kind of energy field that shimmered with rainbow colors. The barrier was clearly artificial, created by advanced Etherian technology. "It's a defensive system," Elena realized. "They sealed themselves in when the bombardment started. The barrier is designed to keep attackers out, but it's also keeping us from reaching them." Elena activated her modified communication equipment and began broadcasting on Etherian frequencies. She had practiced the words countless times during the journey, but using them for real contact was different. "This is Elena of the humans," she said in careful Etherian. "We heard your call for help. We have come from far away to rescue you. Please respond." For long minutes, there was only silence. Elena tried again using different frequency bands and slightly different phrasing. She knew the Etherians were scared. They had been hiding underground for weeks, probably believing that everyone on the surface was dead. Then, finally, a response came through the speakers. It was a weak signal, distorted by the barrier and the interference from the underground systems. But Elena recognized the voice immediately. It was Kyle Ash, the child whose desperate message had reached Earth so many months ago. "Who are you?" Kyle Ash asked in Etherian, the young voice trembling with fear and hope. "Are you real? Or is this another trick by the destroyers?" Elena felt tears forming in her eyes as she heard the child's voice in person for the first time. She had listened to that recorded message thousands of times, but hearing Kyle Ash speak directly was completely different. "We are real," Elena replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "We are humans from a world called Earth. We heard your message calling for help. We have traveled very far to answer your call." There was a long pause. Elena could hear other voices in the background, adult Etherians discussing what they had heard. She could only understand fragments of their rapid conversation, but she caught enough to know they were debating whether to trust these unknown aliens. "You came because of my message?" Kyle Ash asked finally. "But Earth is so far away. The star charts say it would take many lifetimes to travel such a distance. We have fast ships," Elena explained, "and we could not ignore the cry of a child in danger. All of humanity heard your voice and decided to help." Another pause, then an adult Etherian voice joined the conversation. This was an older individual, probably one of the community leaders who had survived the attack. "I am Elder Sindar," the adult said. "If you truly came to help, you must prove it. The destroyers used false voices to trick some of our people into leaving their shelters. Many died because they believed lies." Elena understood the elders' caution. The Etherians had been betrayed before and couldn't afford to trust blindly. She needed to prove that humanity was different from the hegemony. "Elder Sindar," Elena said, "I will prove we are here to help. The destroyers who attacked, your world called themselves the hegemony of the Crimson Star. Their leader was Warlord Thekmor. They came with 200 ships and built orbital platforms to bombard your cities. She could hear surprised murmurs from the Etherians as she continued. We fought them in space above your world. We destroyed their platforms and drove their fleet away. The bombardment has stopped. The sky above Ethros is safe now. Elder Sindar was quiet for a long moment. How could you know these things unless you truly fought the destroyers? We defeated them because we fight for different reasons, Elena explained. They fought for conquest and resources. We fought to protect children who called for help. There is no force in the galaxy stronger than those who defend the innocent. Slowly, carefully, the energy barrier began to fade. The rainbow shimmer grew weaker until it finally disappeared entirely. The cave entrance was open. Colonel Martinez signaled his Marines to stay back as Elena approached the entrance. This was a moment for diplomacy, not military force. Elena activated her suit's lights and stepped into the tunnel system. The caves were larger than she had expected. Crystal formations lined the walls, their natural beauty somehow preserved despite the devastation above. Elena followed the tunnel. Deeper underground, guided by the signals from her communication equipment, she emerged into a vast underground chamber filled with hundreds of Etherians. They were unlike anything Elena had imagined. The aliens were tall and slender, with skin that seemed to be made of living crystal. They glowed with a soft inner light that reflected off the cave walls, creating a beautiful pattern of colors. But these beautiful beings looked tired and scared. They had been hiding underground for weeks, not knowing if anyone on the surface had survived. Many of the adults showed signs of injury from the attack. Children clung to their parents, their crystal, skin dim with fear and exhaustion. In the center of the group stood a young Etherian who could only be Kailash. The child was smaller than the adults, with brighter crystal formations that pulsed with nervous energy. When Kailash saw Elena, the young alien stepped forward with remarkable courage. You are really here, Kailash said in wonder. You heard my voice across all the empty space between stars. Elena knelt down to bring herself closer to the child's eye level. Even through her environmental suit, she could see the hope and gratitude in Kailash's crystalline features. We heard you, Elena said gently. All of humanity heard you. We could not ignore a child calling for help. Elder Sindar approached slowly, studying Elena with ancient eyes that held wisdom and sadness. Your people came so far to help beings you had never met. Why would you risk so much for strangers? Elena looked around the cave at the hundreds of Etherian survivors. Adults, children, families who had lost everything but still clung to hope. She thought about the human fleet above, soldiers who had traveled across the galaxy to answer a call for help. Because that's what good people do, Elena said simply. When someone cries for help, you answer. When children are in danger, you protect them. It doesn't matter how far you have to travel or how difficult the journey might be. She stood up and addressed the entire group of survivors. We have medical ships in orbit, Elena announced. We can take you to safe worlds where you can rebuild your lives. Or if you prefer, we will help you restore Ethros. The choice is yours. But you are no longer alone. The chamber filled with the musical sound of Etherian voices as the